The Crown of Blood.
No matter where, of comfort no man speak. Let's talk of graves, of worms, and epitaphs. Make dust our paper, and with rainy eyes, write sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Let's choose executors and talk of woes, and yet not so, for what can we bequeath, save our deposit bodies to the ground?
Scene 2, Act 3, Richard II. 624 A.S., Anno Salvatoris, in the year of the Savior. The Loch's tendrils snaked their way through much of the heart of the lands to the north of the highlands. Wintry lands as often invaded by frost and rain as they were by barbarians of such savagery that they were beyond the ken of all men of the southlands. Painted, they wore upon their persons furs as well as they might wear hauberks crafted of iron. In days of yore, they and the people of the Calid lands had been one, separated only by the river Wend. More recently, they had changed as surely as the Calids had. Where the men of the dragon ships of the far distant glacial north had arrived amongst the southerners of Britia and Caledonia to slay and even seized some northern lands in this fashion. They had arrived in the territory north of the Wend, at first to do just this, only to find some strange kinship with the painted tribes there. There, many of them had discovered not only friendly ports, but tribal friends and even wives, with the wicked Helgi the Terrible giving over one of his daughters to the mightiest of the local chieftains of those lands. It was this chieftain's son, Samnal the Walker, who had united tribe after tribe, consolidating them together. At first, the question of why had hardly preoccupied the minds of the Calids, caught up with their own ambitions and vision oriented towards the south. But then, the men from north of the Wend had begun to raid south in greater force and with greater precision than ever before. Some had even begun to raid the Western Isles in longships, designed after those of the Norse raiders. This was all too much for Mael Martin, Ard-Ri, or High King of all Calids, and heir to Cosentine II, the Great. A man who, even after his abdication a decade prior, and death 2 years ago, still loomed large throughout the whole of the Isle of Bretwalda. At present, Norwind, as some had begun to call the land of the Painted Ones, had executed several of Caledonia's clergy who had gone north to build a monastery. No less haunted by the shadow of the great king, the present occupant of the throne had waited for just such an opportunity, for a pretext to invade the northern kingdom. The south, all knew, was too fierce to conquer and annex, or so he and his chief counselors believed, whereas the north was ripe for the plucking.
With this conquest, sire, you shall prove thyself greater than your cousin,
said Padraig the Mormaer of Mael, the westernmost Mormaer ship of the realm, Western Isles notwithstanding, and as Mael Martin's good brother, his most ardent supporter.
Aye,
agreed Brother Tog of the Zeukirk Abbey. As a devotee to the war god, Tog was permitted to bear arms and lead men. His abbey, one of the largest in the realm, could command 500 men and had nigh on 300 acres of the finest farmland in the north of the Lordly Isle. Pleased at their support and the murmured agreements of his other Mormaers, it was only Norok who stayed back, the monarch noted. It was this man who had sent south to his liege laird for aid, and who had been keen at the first for an assault across the Wend. Yet, as the ruler of the Calids now discovered, it was he who now kept his distance. Quite why was a mystery to the monarch, who did not take well to the reticence of his vassal.
why so silent, Rory? Lad, you are being high spirits,
cried Mael Martin, sniffing at the air as might a canine eager for the hunt to begin. The youngest of all the Mormaers, at a bare 15 summers old, he was to eye the chortling lairds with visible misery. The mockery directed his way had been noted and dismissed, as he visibly repressed his temper. It was this temper which had won him such infamy in the north, so that he was more something of a mad dog in the eyes of some of his vassals than anything else. His long dark hair was disheveled, and he wore a simple, nondescript hauberk with a brooch tying together his wolf cloak. In this way, he could almost have passed for a Norwendian savage rather than a Calid, his king decided with a sniff.
It is just that I had hoped that we might strike differently, sire,
he hissed from between clenched teeth, his voice higher than that of the other men present, chuckling as always at the youth's voice, for it was a voice that always served as a source of amusement for the monarch and his favorites. It was a sentiment that served to humiliate the Mormaer of Norok, and to make his ruddy cheeks redden. Others might have remembered what it was to be young once, but not those men who lorded over the land of the Khalids. The battle that was to come was one that the heavens themselves seemed to lend their blessing to. Such was the sunny brightness of the heavens high above them. The cheerfulness of the day on an island typically rocked by storms, rain, and snow provided considerable relief to the royal council. The light of the suns did not simply light up the earth, but made the grass in the valley all the greener, the brown of the valley shimmer all the more as though it were formed from light itself. This, in place of being made of dirt, so that all who stared at it felt some measure of awe and appreciation for the magnificence of the land they were lairds of. But this incomparable beauty was matched only by that of the great mountains that decorated the whole of the north of the Isle of Bretwalda. The highlands that were green, dark, and in the winter white, were the spine of Caledonia, it was said. It was to there that the Khalids always looked for guidance, for strength, for it was those mountains that had always shielded them from their enemies. This, even in spite of how there was a new king there by the name of Rosinth the Foul, a terrible worm who had taken up residence only 20 years prior. His own domain, though, was not certain, and did not extend into every individual mountain, nor did it stretch out throughout the whole of the kingdom, only to what he could destroy in a single day ere he tired. Lo, it might be said that there were shadows even amongst the sun-kissed highland mountains. It was thereupon those great thrones that the eye of the monarch fell, save where those of Rory or the previous monarch might have looked on them with adulation. He did not. To his mind, if he could only level them, he might have turned them into arable land and forests, which might have produced more warriors and amusement for him. How he envied the Southron monarchs their power and vast territories. Vast were the ways in which he resented his position and his rule over the lesser people of the north. Even as he grumbled beneath his breath and his innermost being, he turned his gaze to the soothing river that cut through the north as might a knife. It was the Wend, the river that served to almost sever Caledonia wholly and completely from the lands of Norwend and their own northerly neighbors. Its vivid blueness shimmered golden as the sun's rays bounced off it, which served to ease some of his ill mood as he appreciated its simple crystalline beauty.
And how might we strike Norok?
This time it was the Mormaer of Lelam, the lands directly to the south of Malweir. A close friend of the youth's father, his own disapproval for the boy's hesitancy could be seen in his storm-gray eyes.
I have received reports of dragon ships nearer to the mouth of the river,
Rory reported with such keen eagerness as to make his monarch chortle a little. Encouraged by this, he misunderstood the older man's response for approval and carried on.
They have far greater numbers than us, therefore I should recommend that we wait for them to disperse.
Do you have any idea how long that might take?
But of course, Lilam,
Rory retorted, growing irritated by this time.
No more than 4 days. They are savages and shan't keep an army together for any longer than that.
His suggestion reminded Mael Martin of his predecessor, of how he had warned time and again in his last days. Mael Martin, pay heed to the danger of matching enemies' armies number for number or hero for hero. That way lies the path to folly, notably that which gripped me ere the great battle. It was counsel that most might have considered wise, yet not the man's successor. While he appreciated the old man's leal advice, he had found it, as with all other acts on his part towards him, stifling, or suspected it to be self-serving in some capacity.
Why must I be bound by the wishes and stratagems of that old man?
He wondered to himself, never pausing for a moment to question if perhaps the old man of whom he spoke of had a greater wisdom than he himself. It was simply unfathomable. Such is the way of fools, drunkards, and villains throughout history, though, that they never question themselves, but rather commit all to mad follies, in spite, and sometimes to spite, their betters.
I say we advance, and if I say such, then advance we shall,
declared Mael Martin sharply, weary of the complaints and cowardice of certain members of his nobility.
I must protest against such a choice, sire,
protested Norok, once more still uneasy.
Your faith, man. If the High King insists that we war, then to war we shall go, whether it be whither into the sea, or whither across yon river. Therefore cease your bleating.
Malweir exclaimed furiously, weary of the lad's endless stream of complaints. Norok became sullen, sulking in a manner reminiscent of Mael Martin's adult sons, when he denied them the slightest thing, a regular occurrence, for he was a stern parent by nature. It was this vision of the boy who commanded the greatest territorial unit of his kingdom that filled him with the utmost contempt. Malweir and the Mormaer of Fortriu, Melmadoc, exchanged a look with their liege, no less exasperated by Rory than he was.
We march at noon on the morrow.